Drone sightings continue over military bases, including Tennessee. Dr. Steven Greer claims that mystery drones flying over the US are from the Chinese branch of the transnational deep state. Marco Rubio, the new Secretary of State, says the recovery of UFOs is the biggest story in human history. The disclosure of anti-gravity technologies used for decades in the secret space programs is being revealed in clever ways. President Trump just promised to reveal the truth about mystery drones on his first full day in office. These stories and more in Exopolitics Today, the Week in Review.
You are listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla, your source for the uncensored truth regarding the human, extraterrestrial, global, and political agenda. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. And now, here's Dr. Michael Salla.
Welcome to the January 11 edition of Exopolitics Today, the Week in Review. There are quite a few developments, and so let's begin with some photos of orbs or drones sighted over a military base in Tennessee. So here you also have 4 orbs or drones appearing in formation over New Jersey. And this orange UFO orb was spotted over a military base in Tennessee. So the orb drone phenomenon is continuing to be sighted all over the US, including military bases in Tennessee. Here is something concerning Dr. Steven Greer, who appeared on a podcast and says that some of the mystery drones flying over the US are from China. And he's not referring to the Chinese government. He's referring to a transnational deep state Chinese entity or faction that is part of the UFO coverup. So he's claiming that these Chinese-made deep state drones are part of an upcoming false flag event. So Greer does still believe that we are going to have some attempt by the deep state to manufacture a alien invasion, a fake alien invasion of some kind. And what Greer's analysis does is it supports what Matthew Livelsberger, that is the active duty Green Beret who apparently committed suicide when he blew up his Cybertruck in front of the Tesla Tower or in front of the Trump Tower in Las Vegas, Nevada. And he released a email manifesto where he said that the drones are actually gravitic devices coming from a Chinese sub off the Atlantic coast. So Greer's analysis does support that, which is very, very interesting. It brings in the Chinese element into the drone phenomenon. And I will be talking more about that shortly. In a 2017 article, I cited a Dr. Dave Janda who had the following to say about a Chinese deep state faction or a renegade Chinese faction that was operating outside of the guidelines or the approval of the Chinese state. So in short, just as the United States has a rogue deep state faction, so too China does. And apparently this rogue faction was involved in an incident in 2018 that involved a nuclear missile attack on Hawaii, where all Hawaiian residents received a text and a warning early morning of January 13, 2018, about an incoming missile. So, and to take to find shelter. So this is what Dave Janda said about what he was told from a reliable source. What this source told me was that, and again, I've never found this source to be wrong, was that there was actually a missile fired. The missile was brought down by the United States anti-missile program. It was a submarine-based missile, and it was from a Chinese sub. This was a renegade faction within the Chinese military that was in charge of this sub that fired the missile. And in fact, the Chinese Navy, supportive of Xi Jinping, was the ship that took out that submarine. So what Dave Janda was told by his source does match what Steven Greer was told by his sources, that there is a Chinese submarine off the US Atlantic coast that is conducting rogue operations and trying to make it look like someone else is behind that particular operation. So that's a classic false flag event. So I find it very interesting that in 2018, you had this Chinese sub that belonged to a renegade faction associated with the deep state, conducting a false flag operation. And here, more recently, we've got a Chinese sub operating off the Atlantic coast, again conducting a false flag operation, and trying to pin the blame on someone else regarding the drones that it is launching. And according to Matthew Livelsberger, this is something that he discovered during his active duty, and he was blowing the whistle on that. So quite remarkable, the information here that at least some of the drones, I'm not claiming all of the drones, certainly some of the drones are linked to this renegade Chinese faction associated with the transnational deep state that is setting up a false flag event or a psychological operation to make it appear that the United States is under attack from a foreign power, and that presumably would be China. So something to definitely be very wary of. Now, here is something that I find to be quite remarkable. I guess it's probably not so remarkable because, there are a lot of relatively new UFO researchers or people that maybe have not done a dive into the UFO literature and are still pretty conservative in some of their attitudes towards what is out there in terms of the UFO or drone phenomenon. So here is Ross Coulthart, a very well-known Australian journalist who has this to say when it comes to this Cybertruck explosion and what Livelsberger was revealing about the Chinese involvement in the drone phenomenon. So I will play this for you now.
There are some pretty radical claims that were made by Matthew Livelsberger. This was out of Las Vegas, the Green Beret, who killed himself before the Tesla Cybertruck explosion. As part of his alleged manifesto, though, he claims that the drones spotted across the East Coast are coming from China. There's a big chance that these are, commentary from, we have to say this, a mentally ill person. But what can our lawmakers and leaders alike do to stop conspiracy theorists and rumors online from swirling and spreading before they start?
Okay, very good point here. There's absolutely no evidence from any of my sources that these objects are coming from China. Everybody's telling me that there is no capacity by China to deliver car SUV-sized drones, so-called, over US airspace from supposed submarines off the coast. That's a technical ability that China just doesn't have. The allegations of Livelsberger, as you say, he was clearly a man operating under mental stress. He was suffering from PTSD and a marriage breakup. Everything he says should be taken with a considerable grain of salt. But is it possible that as somebody briefed into a national security secret, he was given an explanation for these supposed drones, i.e. China, which may in fact not be accurate? Is the government telling falsehoods to its own people to try and cover for something perhaps more anomalous an explanation? We just don't know.
There are some pretty...
Now, I find it very curious that Ross Coulthart would say there's absolutely no evidence that China is operating or associated with these advanced drone technologies because China has a secret space program. Now, that is something that I detailed in a book I wrote in 2020 called The Rise of the Red Dragon. And China has a long history of being involved in studies of captured or recovered extraterrestrial technologies dating all the way back to the Second World War era. And in fact, the father of China's the conventional space program, actually was involved in setting up China's secret space program, because he, and that is Dr. Shen Shu-shen, that I discuss in my book, Rise of the Red Dragon, actually was a top scientist in the United States up until 1950, and actually was working very closely with Professor Theodore von Karman, who was probably America's leading rocket and aerodynamic specialist. And he was advising the US Air Force on recovered extraterrestrial technologies from Roswell and other places. And Dr. Xian, the Chinese scientist, was Professor von Karman's principal aide. And in 1955, Dr. Xian was returned to China after there was a kind of controversy over his loyalty. It's a long story, but I think that it is very important not to underestimate China's capacity to have studied and successfully reverse engineered some of these advanced extraterrestrial technologies that have been recovered. And this is where I really think that Ross Coulthart and a lot of other researchers that he is involved with and linked in, and that is people like David Grush, we're talking Michael Schellenberger, and also you have George Knapp, and also you have Luis Elizondo, all saying that, yes, craft have been recovered, but they have not been successfully reverse engineered by corporations. And so to me, that is a limited hangout. They're getting, the information they are getting is really surface level. So I find it kind of ironic that Matthew Livelsberger, whose manifesto has been proven to be genuine by the FBI, no less, that he was told during his work that the Chinese, some element of the Chinese military is behind the drone phenomenon. Now, of course, Coulthart thinks that Livelsberger was lied to. I think that he may have been lied to in part in terms of what the goals of this program were, but I think he learned something about the deep state's operations using Chinese assets and wanted to blow the whistle on that and on other nefarious actions. And so this email manifesto is really Matthew Livelsberger. He's kind of like last communications, like a deathbed testimony. And so he was told that the Chinese are involved in the drone phenomenon using anti-gravity propulsion systems. So I think that it should not be dismissed lightly, especially given what my research has shown on China's secret space program. Okay, here's an interview I did with Decode, who is someone who has more than 20 years military service with the US Navy. He served on 5 classes of submarines. 4 of them were nuclear submarines. And so we discussed exotic technologies and the incoming Trump administration. And Gene Decode really does have a wealth of information on these kinds of advanced technologies, as well as his knowledge of deep underground military bases that he has been studying. He definitely has much to offer on the drone phenomenon, like what's been happening there. And one of the things that we discussed in the interview were the claims of William Tompkins, who served with the US Navy and also was a top aerospace contractor for several decades. And he wrote a book called Selected by Extraterrestrials, actually a 3-volume set. And William Tompkins claimed that Nautilus-class nuclear attack submarines were retrofitted to fly into space. So Gene Decode corroborated that. He thought that that was something that was very, very possible using fission nuclear engines, that would be enough to power a retrofitted submarine so that it could fly into space, provided that the propulsion system was swapped out. So what you have is a nuclear-powered submarine, Nautilus class, and Tompkins claimed that in the 1970s, the propulsion system, and there we're talking the engine and so forth, was swapped out with some kind of anti-gravity device, and that the nuclear power that the submarine was generating through its fission reactors was sufficient to power that anti-gravity device so that the submarine could now essentially become a transmedium device. It could operate in the oceans, it could operate in the atmosphere, and it could operate in space. So this is in the 1970s that this happened. And so I think when it comes to anti-gravitic technologies, this is something that other states, other nations have learned about and have been able to do something similar. So yeah, definitely it's a really informative interview to listen to. So I hope you enjoy that. It is now available on all my channels. Now here is a Dr. Eric Davis, who is someone that was associated with he's been associated with a number of cutting-edge research and technology programs dating all the way back to the 1990s. He worked with the National Institute of Discovery Sciences, and then he worked with the ORSAP program. And so he worked with Dr. Hal Puthoff in, I think it's Earth. I can't remember the name of it. It's a company that was set up by Dr. Puthoff in Texas that is studying all of these breakthrough technologies. But Dr. Davis is probably most well known for his involvement in this leaking of a conversation he had with the former director of national intelligence, an Admiral Thomas Wilson, who was trying to find out about a corporate-run reverse engineering program of extraterrestrial craft. And the Admiral was told it's none of his business, he doesn't have need to know, and so he was trying to fish around for information about this. After he retired, and in 2002, he had a conversation with Dr. Davis, and that conversation was leaked, and people have been commenting about that discussion ever since. So here, Dr. Davis, who's really been kind of involved in many classified projects, he says that the UFO UAP issue is about intelligence gathering, using as many sources as possible. So let's see. Let's just see what he said. So Dr. Davis said, and this is UAP1 who cited him, in terms of the UFO drone phenomenon, that it is an intelligence gathering exercise. So this is what Dr. Davis said, quote, It's the domain of military intelligence. The fact that unknown craft are flying around Earth is not a subject for science. It's a subject for intelligence gathering, collection, and analysis. That's because UFOs are not a natural phenomenon, and that's what science studies, end quote. So this is a very, very important statement by Dr. Davis, because there are a lot of people, probably the vast majority of people who get attracted to the UFO phenomenon, think of it as some kind of science. And so they want to do the rigorous scientific study where you use instruments and you create a pool of empirical data that you can analyze, and you can then test those in terms of various hypotheses, the way in which natural science is conducted. But Dr. Davis points out what I think is a very important point, that UFOs are not a natural phenomenon, that they are something that is artificial. It is made by some kind of advanced technology, and so therefore it is not the purview of the natural sciences to understand technologies using sciences that may be decades or centuries ahead of us. That's where you get intelligence gathering. And I totally agree with that. That is something that I've been doing for over 2 decades now, since I got involved in this issue in 2001. That means that in addition to photos, videos, pilot data, the kind of things that make up the kind of like the more conventional UFO research data that ufologists believe makes their efforts worthy as a kind of scientific discipline. You also have FOIA documents, Freedom of Information Act documents. Now, and there are also the first-hand testimonies of whistleblowers, insiders, and experiences. This is where we go from relying on kind of like empirical evidence and documents to testimonies of first-hand witnesses or eyewitnesses to the phenomenon, to whether we're talking about whistleblowers, whether we're talking about insiders or experiences, those that have been on the craft. And finally, there's also leaked official documents. They also need to be considered. And the Majestic Documents is a very impressive collection of leaked official documents that have never been confirmed, but have also been shown to be consistent with documentation from the eras in which those documents detail. So in other words, there's good reason to believe these documents are genuine. And Dr. Robert Wood, who unfortunately is recently deceased, and his son Ryan Wood, they were the ones that were pioneers in analyzing a lot of these leaked official documents and found them to be very, very credible. And there are also psychic sources of information we need to consider, such as remote viewing. And we know that the CIA was very interested in remote viewing as an intelligence gathering tool, because there have been declassified Freedom of Information Act documents that show that the CIA did sponsor remote viewing experiments, such as what happened on Mars up to 1 million years ago. Was there a civilization there, and was there a catastrophe there? And indeed, there was a remote viewing project done. Joseph McMoneagle, very famous remote viewer, was part of that, and so this is something that the CIA is was interested in at the time, and so we're looking at psychic sources of information. Now, when I first began doing this UFO research back in 2001. I wrote a paper. My first study paper came out in January 2003. And in that, I actually differentiated between all of these different sources of information in terms of reliability, which is pretty much the way in which intelligence gathering operates. You start off with your most credible sources. So you will have photographs, you'll have documents, you'll have radar tracking data and so forth. And then you have other sources like eyewitness testimonies, leaked documents, you're going to have psychic sources and so forth. And those are going to be kind of like less reliable. But nevertheless, as an intelligence gathering operation, you look at all of those sources. And that's why I think exopolitics is much richer in terms of the data it examines and the conclusions that are reached in exopolitics, whereas a lot of UFO researchers who really are very good investigators really just get stuck on the surface phenomenon of UFOs. That, okay, they just look at photographs, they look at sightings, and they try and work out, well, which sightings, which photos, which videos are credible, but they don't go beyond that to look at, who are the occupants of the craft. Are the craft's occupants human-looking extraterrestrials? Are they reptilian, grey, and all sorts of things? And why are they here? What are they doing? So those are the things that conventional UFO researchers shy away from because they say that the data is not convincing. But as an intelligence gathering exercise, I think you need to look at all that data. All right, here's something that I thought was very significant, and this is the incoming Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. And this is what he has to say about the UFO phenomenon. So let me play this for you.
You're on the Foreign Affairs Committee, and you're really involved in foreign affairs. There's been a lot of articles lately about UFOs. I know this question is a little out there. Is there any truth to any of this?
Well, we don't know. All I've said is we have people that have very high clearances, both today and in the past, who did really important work for our government or continue to do important work for the government, who have come forward with some claims about the U.S. having in the past recovered exotic materials and then reverse engineered those materials to make advances in our own defenses and technologies. That's the claim they make. Now, I don't know if those claims are true or not. What I do know is that one of two things is happening here. Either they're telling the truth, and that is something that obviously would be the biggest story in human history, or we have people in really important positions of government who are crazy and who are out there making up stories and who are still in positions of importance. Either one is a big problem. So we've got to figure out which one of these two it is, because the second one in particular would be very troubling. But all we know is claims that people have made. These are credible people that have done and continue to do important work for the country. And by law, we're required when they come forward as whistleblowers to take their claims seriously and to investigate them. But we just don't know. That's the answer.
Okay, so there you have Marco Rubio saying that this is a phenomenon that if these insiders, if these officials are truthfully reporting what they saw, is the biggest story in human history. And I think this is kind of like indicates how far we've come, that these major political figures are now openly talking about the recovery of UFOs as something that is very, very credible because of the quality of the individuals who have been releasing this information. So, and as Rubio says, there's two possibilities. These people are telling the truth, in which case it's the biggest story in human history, or if they're not telling the truth, then they are being lied to, and that there's some kind of deception going on. So this is where I think we need to kind of like be open to possibilities here. Okay, here's Elena Danon, and she commented on an article that appeared in the Daily Mail, and in this article, it describes a UFO-like electric vehicle which gives passengers 360-degree views. And so here you have the craft, and this is how it would look. This is an illustration of how it would operate in a major urban center. Now, this is where it is very interesting. What is the propulsion system of this craft? So in the article itself, this is what is said. Let me read that out. While most electric flying vehicles rely on exposed propellers, the Invo Moon keeps everything within the aluminium frame. The vehicle uses a complex new aerodynamic design in which a dozen motors, all containing spinning spheres, are positioned in a circle around the side of the vehicle. Now, that's very, very interesting. A dozen motors containing spinning spheres are rotated around the circumference of this craft. Now, what is very kind of interesting here is that Elena Danon, in her book, We Will Never Let You Down, that was published in 2021, describes something very similar in terms of the German Haunebu antigravitic spheres system, the Flux Liner, and the Galactic Federation of Worlds scout ships. Now, here is something from page 187 of her book, We Will Never Let You Down, where she drew the schematics of a flying saucer craft that is used by the Galactic Federation and also is related to the Haunebu craft that the Germans built, where they do have these rotating spheres that are generating some kind of anti-gravitic device or anti-gravitic propulsion system. So here you have the spheres in the craft. In the Daily Main story, there were a dozen engines with these spheres inside rotating. So, and here you have like 6 toroids, so 6 spinning spheres. So I thought it was a very powerful validation for what Elena Danon had to say. Just again, I don't think I showed this diagram of Elena Danon's schematic of a ship from page 187 of, actually it might be page 287. Actually, 187 or 287 of her book, We Will Never Let You Down. And it shows these kind of like spinning spheres that are part of the propulsion system of that craft. Yeah, here we go. It's page 287. Yeah, that was my mistake. Okay, so yeah, just go to page 287 if you have that book. But I thought it was a really remarkable corroboration for her information that she received from the Galactic Federation of Worlds, and that this Daily Mail article and the craft that is being proposed as something that could be developed in the next few years has very similar principles in terms of the propulsion system to the scout craft used by the Galactic Federation and the Haunebu craft that the Germans had developed earlier. Okay, so here is something. Dr. Steven Greer was told by his sources that the deep state cabal is using its Chinese assets to build and deploy anti-gravitic drones from submarines off the Atlantic coast. So I talked about that a little bit earlier. And this makes Michael Jaco's claim that Matthew Livelsberger, the Green Beret Cybertruck bomber, was on the run and killed for disclosing deep state secrets very plausible. So Michael Jaco is a former Navy SEAL instructor, and also CIA operator. And he had experiences concerning a previous whistleblower that Project Camelot covered, who disclosed the use of drones in, let's just say, I need to be careful of the censor machine, especially on YouTube. Let's just say that the use of drones leading in the murder of civilians in covert military operations, unnecessarily so. So according to Michael Jaco, this Matthew Livelsberger, he was blowing the whistle on what he had learned about that kind of illicit program, as well as the Chinese drones using gravitic propulsion systems. So in Jaco's version, Livelsberger was killed, and that it was made to look like it was a suicide. So Livelsberger is a hero rather than a villain, as the legacy media is currently portraying him. Okay, so all this has echoes of the nuclear missile attack on Hawaii that I talked about earlier on January 13, where the deep state used Chinese naval assets to launch a missile and tried to frame North Korea so that a nuclear war could start involving North Korea and the United States. So once again, the deep state seems intent on starting a war, this time by making it appear that China is behind the drone phenomenon or drone incursions. But it's Chinese elements of the deep state that are involved, not the Chinese government. So that's a crucial distinction here that we need to keep in mind based on the information that different sources have talked about. The Steven Greer sources. I talked about Dave Janda's sources. You also have Livelsberger's revelation. And I think when we put all this together, it is very, very plausible that there is a Chinese deep state asset which is running a psyop using these drones to frame mainland China as being responsible for the phenomenon. Okay, so here, let's see. Okay, now this is someone who claimed that officials from Fort Bragg confirmed that Matthew Livelsberger did write the email manifesto asserting China is behind the mystery drone phenomenon. The officials, however, denied that China is launching drones from a sub off the US East Coast. Okay, so this is significant because Livelsberger's testimony is very explosive, literally and figuratively. So let's look at what the CIA had to say about Matthew Livelsberger's email manifesto, because that contains this kind of like really very revealing information concerning China and this kind of military drone operation unnecessarily targeting civilians in these covert military operations. So let's listen to this.
Spencer Evans, Special Agent in charge of the FBI's Las Vegas division. In terms of a question about the validity of what Livelsberger put out to the public, either in the two-page manifesto or additional documentation we're discovering, we're not speaking to the content. I can say, as Sheriff Corrin described and others, it runs the gamut. I mean, he's talking about feeling that he was, surveilled, guilt. You can tell there's, some anguish there, some frustration with the government. I mean, there's a whole host of things. So we haven't gotten into, what's legitimate, what's not. The only thing that, out of an abundance of caution, in as much as there's Department of Defense equities that speak to sources and methods or something else that would endanger folks overseas, that's not being released. But beyond that, we haven't vetted any of his writings to determine, what's legitimate and what was in his own head. Yeah, including, he alleges a variety of things, and we haven't gotten into the weeds on any of that.
That podcast email is him.
Yeah, so we have confirmed that the document that he sent to the podcast, we know that he was the one that sent that document. That's correct.
Okay, so that's very important right there. So that the FBI confirmed that email manifesto actually was written by Matthew Livelsberger. That was him. And because he was on the run, he felt threatened, and of course he died in this apparent suicide. You need to treat this email manifesto as like his final, like a deathbed confession. So he was revealing the truth as he best understood it, and so that really does kind of like point to this Chinese involvement in the drone operations. And I think that then takes us to the kind of information that Steven Greer, Dave Janda were discussing, which is a rogue element of the Chinese state that is doing this, not the conventional Chinese military. And let's see, Jordan Sather, so he came up with some inconsistencies about the manifesto allegedly released by Livelsberger. So he was kind of like a little skeptical of the idea that China was involved in launching drones with gravitic propulsion systems with unlimited payload capacity from submarines off the US Atlantic coast, which I agree is highly dubious. So if we're talking about unlimited payload capacity, maybe what Livelsberger was trying to say is that these drones with these gravitic propulsion systems, unlimited payload capacity in the form of maybe having very dangerous payloads that they could take, something like that. Now, there's also claims or inconsistencies that lead to Livelsberger being used as a patsy for the Cybertruck bombing. And I think this is something similar to what Michael Jaco believed as well, that Livelsberger was killed because he was revealing too much. So, all of the inconsistencies that Jordan Sather raises does suggest that the Cybertruck attack was part of some kind of covert psychological operation that made people believe that Livelsberger had first-hand knowledge of China being behind the mystery drone phenomenon, as well as blowing the whistle on illegal activities by the Trump administration. So there seemed to be couple of agendas at work here with the email manifesto that Livelsberger was revealing, that someone or the deep state was conducting a psychological operation, or maybe trying to make it appear as though the Chinese state was behind the drone phenomenon, as opposed to these rogue elements that are connected to China. So when I initially saw this, Sather's analysis, I raised the question, well, who benefits from casting China as the central villain in the mystery drone phenomenon and smearing the incoming Trump administration with past misdeeds? So who benefits from the information Livelsberger had disclosed going public in the way it did, in the form of a Cybertruck exploding right in front of the Trump Tower? Who benefits? I think the most obvious answer to that is the deep state. All right, so now this is where we get to some people, UFO experts, who are trying to analyze all of the information concerning mystery drones seen near military bases and reaching conclusions that can be very, very dangerous. So let's see, for example, Nick Pope. Let's see what Nick Pope had to say. Nick Pope, drones, an update. The New York Times published an interesting and important article on January 4, linked below, titled Drones, Exploding Parcels and Sabotage, How Hybrid Tactics Target the West. It contained the following paragraph. Military analysts have concluded these drones may have been on a state-sponsored surveillance mission, according to one US official familiar with the incidents, who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss an open investigation. British and German defense officials declined to discuss details of the sightings. This was in relation This was in relation to drone sightings over the UK and Germany, but it would be decidedly odd to say that such state-sponsored surveillance missions could happen in Europe, but not the US. Those people who know about the interactions between the government and the media on classified and or sensitive topics will be aware how to read the phrase, according to one US official familiar with the incident who spoke on the condition of anonymity. So whatever people think about the US drone sightings, they most certainly are a defense and national security issue. Misidentifications and mass hysteria clearly do explain some US drone sightings, but using this partial explanation to dismiss all the sightings risks throwing out the baby with the bathwater and can only help adversaries of the US. So what he's really saying here is that someone is using these drones in a hybrid war against the West, that the drones in the US, that is over the US, someone is using those drones in a hybrid war. And that similarly, you get these drones being used in a hybrid war in Europe. So this is where you get to the dangerous conclusion that emerges from Nick Pope's article, where hostile nations such as Russia is using drones against Europe in this hybrid war, and China using drones against the US in another hybrid war. So I think this is where Nick Pope and many other UFO researchers really don't connect with the idea, don't know about, they just have no way of introducing the idea of a deep state with the power, resources, and technologies to conduct false flag operations to kickstart wars between well-armed nations. This is something that I think is part of the geopolitical world. Normal geopolitical analysts, they look at these issues. You have drones, you have them flying over territories, different nations' sensitive military facilities, and these drones are part of a kind of like seem to be part of a hybrid war that is going on. And so the assumption is that, well, this is China's behind the drone phenomenon in the US and Russia's behind the drone phenomenon in Europe, and that is part of the hybrid war that is going on. That's the geopolitical analysis that many researchers, and Nick Pope is one of them, is saying is happening. And I think this is where the exopolitical analysis needs to come in. That is, you need to look at a third party, a deep state, some call it the cabal, some call it the Illuminati, that has a lot of its own advanced technologies that it could use in covert operations and make it appear as though, either it's Russia using drones in a hybrid war against Europe, or China using drones in a hybrid war against the United States. And this is well summed up by a Hawaii Senator, Daniel Inouye, when he referred to the existence of, quote, a shadowy government with its own air force, its own navy, its own fundraising mechanism, and the ability to pursue its own ideas of the national interest, free from all checks and balances and free from the law itself. So, he was talking about the deep state having a parallel military and covert operational resources and personnel that it can use to conduct operations all over the world. And so this is part of the exopolitical analysis, because this is the same shadowy government, the deep state, that is covering up the existence of advanced extraterrestrial technologies and extraterrestrial visitors. So I think we need to be very, very careful when we try to reach conclusions about drones flying near military facilities and who is actually involved, and not rush to generalize that this is part of a hybrid warfare being conducted by Russia or China. Okay, here's the Galactic Spiritual Informers Connection in England. They have just about sold out of tickets, only 15 general admission tickets left. So So great event that's coming up on May 10 and 11 in Eastbourne, England. I will be there along with JP, Elena, Danon, Tony Rodriguez, and a collection of other speakers from Britain. And it is going to be really an extraordinary event. So thanks to all that purchased tickets and made the conference a success, or being sold out certainly is an important step in a successful conference. And once it's conducted, I'm sure it will be a very successful conference. And of course, there'll be a flyover that Elena Danon will be leading, and will be interesting to see what it is that people see. Will it be like the Colorado event where people see fleets of craft? So I think a lot of people are looking forward to that. I certainly am. UFO Disclosure Endgame is a very thoughtful article by Christopher Sharp that discusses how well the incoming Trump administration is likely to deal with the UFO UAP issues. So this is an article that came out in an online blog called, let me just go there, show you what this is. Okay, Liberation Times, there we go. So it's Liberation Times. So this is a UFO Disclosure Endgame written by Christopher Sharp. And generally speaking, I think it is a very competent article that deals with incoming figures in the Trump administration and how they're going to deal with the UFO issue. And also, well, so here, for example, you have people like John Ratcliffe, who's going to be heading the CIA, Marco Rubio, who's going to be heading the State Department, and Michael Waltz, who's going to be the National Security Advisor, all of whom are advocates of UFO transparency. And according to Sharp, whistleblowers such as Carl Nell, Lou Elizondo, David Grush, all of whom have impressive military backgrounds. They were officers in different military services. Actually, I think Elizondo was an NCO, but then became a GSA, which is a kind of an administrator in the federal bureaucracy. But that they were all in senior positions during their careers, and that, according to Sharp, they would make excellent additions to the incoming Trump administration. Now, Sharp also discusses how JFK was briefed on the UFO phenomenon, and that there was a crash retrieval that occurred in 1962, and Kennedy had learned that a UFO that was of extraterrestrial origin had been shot down. And so apparently the pledge by President Trump and Robert Kennedy, also very involved in the effort to release all the JFK assassination files, that might also be an important game changer. Now, this is where you get a very interesting piece of information. I hadn't heard of this whistleblower or insider, Richard Banderick, who says 40 years ago he came across non-human intelligence materials while at a company, and he said that the company couldn't reverse engineer the craft or the materials, and that it was just too advanced and that it would kind of disintegrate. Very, very interesting. So Sharp concludes his article by proposing the creation of new fields such as xenoscience, exopolitics, astrobiology, and exotheology. So while I think there's a lot to commend about Sharp's article, and especially his advocacy of new fields such as exopolitics, he does miss some crucial information. Now, none of the individuals he cites and the whistleblowers for the incoming Trump administration are proponents of information that advanced non-human intelligence technologies have been successfully reverse engineered to create fleets of anti-gravity spacecraft used for off-planet operations. So that's very, very interesting. all of those officials that he cited, as well as the whistleblowers that are revealing what they know, all claim that there has been no successful reverse engineering of these alien spacecraft. And Sharp doesn't deal with the claims of multiple insiders' experiences that describe service in secret space programs. For example, JP, who I've been working with and recently retired from the US Army, has photos of some of the secret space program craft he witnessed and was taken on. So it's not just a story. JP has photos of the craft he was taken on. So this is where I think you have a kind of bias here again, from conventional UFO researchers that shy away from information such as secret space programs actually being real, that reverse engineering has been successful, that meetings and encounters with different extraterrestrials actually is a regular part of this kind of exopolitics world. Now, as far as Dr. Steven Greer is concerned, I strongly disagree with his analysis of different extraterrestrials that are visiting our planet and in terms of their motivations. They span the gamut from the good, the bad, and the ugly, and trying to claim they're all good, I think, is nonsense. But nevertheless, Greer has done sterling work in exposing the aerospace companies and military programs or facilities in successfully reverse engineering extraterrestrial craft and in making public the testimonies of hundreds of whistleblowers and witnesses that expose these projects. So he's really done great work there, but he's ignored. And that is a shame, because Sharp, with many other researchers, appear to be engaged in a limited hangout that sidelines the info from Greer and other exopolitics researchers who highlight SSPs and ET contacts by hundreds, thousands of experiences. And this is quite important, very important to note that the information Greer, myself, and others have been putting out about people who have been in secret space programs, who talk about them, who have had contacts with extraterrestrials, that these are the eyewitness testimonies of people, some of whom have excellent credentials and some supporting documentation like photos. So why is all that information being ignored? And so that does make you suspect that there is some effort to kind of like promote what is essentially a limited hangout. That yes, we've recovered some UFO craft. Yes, they are linked to non-human intelligence. And yes, reverse engineering efforts have been attempted, but none of those have been successful. And none of the craft up there are our reverse engineered anti-gravity craft. That's just conspiracy theory nonsense. Don't believe it. So that's the kind of state that we're in at the moment. That there's a big division between these more conventional UFO researchers, Christopher Sharp being among them, and others such as Steven Greer, myself, who do go beyond those kinds of conclusions and more into this kind of exopolitical realm. All right, here is a video extract I did on the release of innovative technologies that can revolutionize our planet. So this is an extract from the video or from the webinar I did on December 28, where I covered the exopolitical state of the planet. And so for the first half hour, I focused on the suppression of innovative technologies using something called the Sensitive Application Warning System, and also the secrecy orders imposed on inventions that violate certain categories deemed to be sensitive, and those categories involve such things as anti-gravity propulsion, human longevity, age regression, etc. And so there's a system that's been set in place, which for decades has been actively suppressing inventions dealing with those things, inventions that could significantly prolong our life, cure us of all of these incurable diseases, replace the fossil fuel industry with kind of free energy, come up with anti-gravitic propulsion systems as opposed to rocket propulsion systems, that these have all been suppressed, and that there are over close to 6,500 inventions that are currently withheld due to secrecy orders. So I thought that this was very, very important information to be shared publicly. So what I decided was to release the first 30 minutes of that webinar for free to people, and so it's available on all my channels: Patreon, YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, and so forth. And you can watch this and see the data for yourself. I mean, I document it very well, and it really does show this has been happening, and why I think the Trump administration is going to make a sincere effort to release these suppressed technologies over the next 4 years. So that is, I think, a very worthwhile goal that the Trump administration does have. Okay, so here is something that happened on just very, very recently. So we're talking Thursday, January 9 or January 10. President Trump just promised to reveal the truth about a mystery drones on his first full day in office. So it'll be interesting to see just how much will be disclosed about who and what is behind the phenomenon. So this is a very important development that Trump is going to give a report or issue a report on January 21 on the drone phenomenon. Now, what can we expect? I think that there's going to be some really important information that is revealed concerning the truth of who's behind the drone phenomenon. So let me play.
You said that you knew you thought the government knew what was happening with these drones over New Jersey. There were some by Bedminster.
I don't know. They're over Bedminster a lot, so I can imagine. I'm going to give you a report on drones about 1 day into the administration, because I think it's ridiculous that they're not telling you about what's going on with the drones. And it's not only with me. Glenn was telling me today that in Virginia they have drones all over the place too, and nobody's reporting it. I don't know why they're not. Do you want to say something about that?
Just one quick comment.
Okay, well, just to summarize what Trump was saying at this press conference was that the drone phenomenon is something that has not been adequately explained by the current Biden administration. And when he comes in, he's going to make it a priority to release a report on the drone phenomenon in terms of what is known officially. And that report will be released on his first full day in office on January 21. So that promises to be quite an important report and announcement. Now, how much will he reveal about the drone phenomenon? Who will he say is behind it? That is something we just have to wait. But I think that this, given Donald Trump's kind of past statements and history, I think we can expect a significant disclosure over what is really behind the drone phenomenon, and take us on a path towards genuine disclosure. I think that is very, very exciting. Okay, so this is where I get to announce that later today, this will be this afternoon at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That will be 11 o'clock Pacific Time and 7 o'clock in England, GMT time. that I'm going to be do my next monthly live briefing. I do one of these a month, and that's where I get to summarize the top exopolitics stories over the previous 4 weeks, and I get to talk about current geopolitical events, and also get to give you a little bit of an idea of what is coming in terms of future interviews. And finally, we have a Q&A. Now, in this particular exopolitics briefing, I'm going to be talking about this development about the drone report that Donald Trump has promised to reveal or issue on January 21st. And how much is he going to reveal in terms of the different sources of the drones? That what I know from different insiders or different contactees' experiences is that the drones span the spectrum from extraterrestrial spacecraft, aerospace corporate vehicles using exotic technologies, military drones using advanced technologies, so using stealth and so forth, and being able to operate in as a transmedium device that is in the oceans and out of it, and then commercial drones with conventional technologies. So yes, I'll be covering the drone phenomenon as well as other top exopolitics stories from the previous 4 weeks, including the information from JP concerning these cigar-shaped craft that are going to be the next stage in the drone phenomenon, that they're going to upscale, that rather than us just kind of like speculating over these mystery drones that are the size of cars, now they're going to upgrade. And JP says that what he saw at a military facility were cigar ships that were about 50 meters in length, and they were what the White Hats, the Earth Alliance, is going to be releasing as a prelude to even larger ships appearing. So we really are in a time when there's going to be a lot of very important information being disclosed about different UFO craft that are being seen all over the sky. So that you can watch by going to Crowdcast. If you are a Patreon member at the level 2, which is the solar patron level, then this live briefing is what you get to see. It is part of your membership. If you are not a Patreon member and you just want to watch it as a one-off, then you can pay through Crowdcast. So you can pay through Crowdcast or through PayPal. So either way, but information is on my website, exopolitics.org. Trump to expose truth about mystery drones, monthly exopolitics briefing tomorrow. So this is today where you can register, and I hope to see you. And for those that do register, I appreciate your support. This really does help me in continuing to put out these weekly updates, the Exopolitics Today Week in Review, that it goes out for free, as well as all the interviews. They go out for free. So those that register for these for the monthly briefings or for my bi-monthly webinar series, that is how you support me, and so I can continue to put out a lot of free content for those that can't afford to do these things. So thank you for watching, and aloha.
You have been listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Join or start a conversation in the comments. Take the time to explore the vast library of best-selling books, webinars, and podcasts by Dr. Salla. Visit exopoliticstoday.com.